James, all accountants. In this video, we're going to look at wages, payroll liability control accounts, and PAYE liability control accounts. So, at the end of your period, you just want to make sure that in your Xero, the liability due to any employees and the liability due to HMRC for PAYE agrees to what you expect it to be. For PAYE, it would be balance due as per HMRC online, and obviously if you haven't paid some of your employees, you would know that some balances would be unpaid at the period end. So to be able to check the balances in these codes, what you need to do is go to your trial balance. So you go accounting and then reports, and then we would look at right down the bottom here. We've got taxes and balances trial balance. So I would favourite that one by clicking the star, so it comes up on your list. You don't have to find it on here like this again. And then you would select your period you're looking at, if you're looking at sort of the end of the last month just past. And then the trial balances are the balances in every code at that point in time. It's your full account. So when you see a set of accounts, a trial balance is split into a profit and loss account and a balance sheet in a formal set of accounts. But the trial balance is a combination of the profit and loss and the balance sheet all together. So what we're looking at is the balance sheet code. So you would go down to here, and if you had some PAYE payable, you'd see a code here saying PAYE, and then you'd be able to click into it to look at the transactions. Similarly, if you had some wages payable, you would see a wages payable code down here is a liability, and you'd be able to click in and see the transactions. In this demonstration, we don't have any entries to look at, so what I've done is looking at an Excel version of the transactions. So this would be a standard sort of view of a wages payable account. So just to explain what you're looking at here, so when we do your payroll, the information from the payroll system should come in as a journal to bring in the liability into the code. So you'll see here, sent from BrightPay. If you use Xero for your payroll, it might be Xero journals. So it might say, Xero payroll liability or something along those lines. But what you'll see, it brings in the credit balance for the wages payable. So in this business, so you've got 2 employees to pay. And then the other side you should see is the actual wages being paid as the spend money transactions. You'll see these in the debit column going out. So, in an ideal world, and in sort of most instances, you would run your payroll, have a liability to pay, and then pay it. And then, most people perhaps pay their wages before the month end. So if you see here, these are all coming in April. So at the end of April, the balance of all the entries goes down to 0 because the wages liability is paid. So when you're looking at this code, that's what you really want to see. You want to see the liability coming in and then the payments to people going out, and hopefully it should come back to 0. Now, if it doesn't come back to 0, it means, you've got something to look into. So common things it could be, the wages payments, they could have got posted perhaps to a profit and loss code. So instead of putting them to wages payable, you might have put them to salaries, is a common mistake we see. Another thing, there could be mistakes on the amounts paid to people. So you could have to look at the amounts paid and check it to your payroll report or pay slips to check that the amounts paid to people are correct and there's no errors on the actual payment amounts. So those are sort of the most common things that can go wrong on the wages payable control. Obviously, in an ideal world, each month it goes back to 0 and everything's all good. And you might not even see it on your trial balance because it's 0. In regards to PAYE, a similar thing will apply. You should have a journal in your go to your PAYE code. So we've got the wages payable code here, but if just say this is PAYE, you would have the same thing. A journal would come in for the PAYE liability from the payroll system. So you'd have a credit balance for PAYE. And then after the month end, normally with payroll, because you have a liability for the period and then it's paid normally after the month end. So with a PAYE account, you'd normally see at the end of the month that the liability would be the 1 month PAYE that hasn't been paid yet. Obviously, if you're a bit behind with your PAYE, what we'd suggest is keeping a separate record of your built-up liability at the period end, so you've got a record of it, so you can easily just update that with next month's liability and then any payments made off it, and then you can check that agrees back to your 0. But if you're on top of your PAYE payments, normally all you'd see in this code is PAYE liability and then PAYE paid. So instead of wages paid, it would be a HMRC payment, PAYE paid. So if you don't see that and you're sort of thinking, I definitely paid my PAYE, but it's not shown in this code, again, perhaps it's just a misposting. You could search for the amount. It might have been posted to wages against salaries, perhaps by mistake. These things happen. So it's just a case of making sure that the balance, when you look at your end of your report, so in this report it comes back to nil, but perhaps in the PAYE report it might not be nil because you could have 1 month still to pay. So you just want to make sure the closing liability actually matches what you owe to HMRC. And that's what you do in a PAYE code. Similar process to a wages payable code.